I'm going to share my screen with you. Oops. Let's come back here. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Well, welcome to CHCMHS003, provide recovery-orientated mental health services. My name's Deb, and I'm the fill-in for Helen. Tonight, Helen will be back next week for you. Okay, let's get straight into the welcome to country. Let me read that for you. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual, and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. Okay, just a little bit of housekeeping here. The class breaks tonight will be 7 o'clock to 7:10 and then 8 till 8:10. Okay. We're a camera on college, building connection by seeing each other. Reminder, all of our classes are recorded for your knowledge and for you to watch these when you have a moment. Okay, microphones on mute, please. Please remember to keep your microphones on mute unless you need to ask a question or contribute to class discussion. Class participation, we'd love to hear from you. Please use the Zoom reactions button to put your hand up, and being in respectful relationships, be mindful and kind with your words and respect the opinion of others. We're all learners and in this together. No smoking or vaping. We wouldn't ask anything of our learners that we wouldn't expect in industry. And a trigger warning, looking after yourself is key to longevity within the industry. So if you feel triggered, it's crucial you access your personal supports. Be kind to yourself, make time for other activities that nourish your mind and soul so you feel refreshed and ready for each class. Okay, just going to stop the share here and just let the people in and then start again. Okay, I'll just let these people in here. And then we'll just go back into here again as well. Okay. Okay. Let's look at session 1. I'll just come back again. I just want to see if it's here. Okay, just having a look at session 1 here. We're going into that now. Let's go into an overview of the session. This session, we're going to look at sharing information and we're going to look at collecting information. Then we're going to look at informing the recovery plan. So I'm going to go a little bit into a recovery plan further on when we get to that particular section of tonight, and we're going to have some discussions on that as well. Okay, let's look at working in a respectful way. So supporting an individual's recovery means demonstrating respect towards everyone and requires both collaboration and organisation. This also requires you to be aware of legislation requirements and work towards legal standards. By supporting, demonstrating, and collaborating. So when you're working with your clients and the networking, your teams you network with, as well as supporting, demonstrating, and collaborating with them, you're also working with in an organised way. Let's look at some legal and ethical considerations as well. Okay. Let's look at these are some practice frameworks, some codes of practice, legislative and ethical requirements for providing services to client with coexisting issues. Okay, let's look at, for example, work role boundaries. Now, work role boundaries are and a technique in maintaining a professional relationship with the client. So, for example, you're building a rapport, but it's not getting too close. Your client is not a part of your social group. You're not working with a member of your family at all. This is a client that you need to be able to work within boundaries so that you have a professional relationship with them. So it's explaining it's the client-worker relationship and discussing responsibilities and rights for all parties. So once we have work role boundaries in place, then we can effectively manage a professional relationship. Okay, so the rights and responsibilities for both clients and workers, now that includes rights for the service provider. So the service provider is to be treated with respect by clients and to receive training relevant to the role. So you have a right to work in an environment that is safe. Now, this is part of WHS requirements as well. It's also part of a duty of care, which we'll look at shortly as well. The responsibilities for the service providers for workers to seek further advice or support when something is beyond their scope. So if you're in a situation that you've been asked to do a task and you've not been trained in that task, you haven't had any instruction. If you're in a task that is using some form of machinery and you haven't been trained in that at all with the machines, then you need to step up. You need to say something. It is the workplace, your employer's responsibility to train you in those particular areas. It's also their duty of care, as I've said before. It's also the employer's responsibility to the service provider to ensure a culturally safe environment and to document all care and planning as well. So you've got to be in a safe environment. That means both physically and emotionally. Like a safe environment is also free from bullying. It's also free from sarcastic remarks. It must be an area that you feel safe in. When we look at rights for clients, they to receive equal treatment, to be informed about all services and to receive services and support. So the clients need to have equal treatment and to be their services need to be discussed. And this is person-centered care, or in some cases CDC, client-directed care as well. So the clients need to be in the center of their care. They have a right to refuse. They have a right to have their care explained to them. WHS. So in work health and safety, workers have a legal responsibility to ensure a safe workplace for everyone, including themselves, colleagues, clients, and visitors. So workers must report any incidents or accidents that occur, and workers have the rights to receive safety training from their employer. They must follow the WHS policies and procedures of the workplace. Workers must report any hazards right away. Okay, so it's under work health and safety. That's the act you're working under. You must abide by that act. Just to make matters a little bit more interesting, the act changes. There's different acts in different states. So you need to actually look up the act of the state that you are in, so you can get some information and abide by that particular act. We've got some more little favourites here. So this is, we're going to look at duty of care, human rights, dignity of risk and discrimination. Now, I would like to move these to human rights and dignity of risk around, because I like to have dignity of risk and duty of care together, because they balance each other out. So for example, let's look at duty of care first. So duty of care, we would know in 3 words as do no harm. A duty of care is to ensure a person's rights are met, to identify, assess, and take steps to minimize or remove risks, identify risks specific to a person's circumstances, and to take steps to minimize these risks. Duty of care balances out dignity of risk. So duty of care is not only to yourself and your client, but as it states, it's also to your employer. It's also to the people that you work with. Okay, so working with dignity of risk, this means that the client has the right to take risk and to make their own choices about their care and their health. And their right to take risks in making decisions on life experiences and learn from any mistakes that occur due to these decisions. So on one hand, you've got duty of care, and duty of care means that you have to remove or protect the client from risk and from danger, from hurting themselves. But then you've got dignity of risk as well, which says the client has the right to take their own choices. So this can be quite a kind of a seesaw movement going on. But let's look at how we can manage that. So let's look at an example. I think is a good place to start. So if you had a client that had a mobility challenge, mobility challenges. So perhaps they had been assessed as a high falls risks, for example. And the client has asked you that they want to walk, they want to get out of their wheelchair, and they would like to walk around 10 meters down to this particular area of the garden. Okay, so the client has the right to take risk. And what you can do at that stage, and this has happened before, I've taken this one out of an experience I watched at one of the organizations I worked with. What you can do there is to assess the risk, to make sure that the area that your client has requested to walk over is flat. It has a handrail on one side, the lighting is good, the client has good footwear on, the client is hydrated, the client has used the bathroom, the client, you have assessed him when he wakeboarded earlier on. So once you've done that, you can see that you expect the client or suggest to the client that you try and practice first. But what you must do before that is to advise the client of the risks. So you tell the client, explain to the client exactly what the risks are of what they're wanting to do, and then make sure that you also document that in his file as soon as possible. And if you have a witness to that is you need to put them down as well. You need to document that. You need to document everything. Documentation is your best friend. For example, this particular client had cognitive impairment, and so he had did have some memory decline. So he said, no, the girl did not advise me of that. I didn't know anything about that. When, of course, you had already done that. So you must advise client of the risk and you must document that as well. Okay, just coming down into human rights. The Australian Human Rights Commission, I don't know whether you've been online and had a look at that. Please keep that as one of your links that you could go in again and again to have a look at things. The Australian Human Rights Commission Act 1986 identifies that workers must treat all clients the same and ensure equal treatment and support. Human rights violations include social and community isolation and exclusion, restraint or seclusion against their will. That's an interesting one, the restraint one. That has been a point of contention for many years in this area, and it is somewhat discussed. How can I put this? Discussed quite passionately. There's also the inability to access services and support and abuse when in care. So this is part of the human rights violations. Also discrimination in employment and or training or schooling. Not being treated with respect and dignity and not being able to make decisions about their own care. The discrimination, so we must apply a non-discriminatory approach here, accepting the client's cultural customs, practices, and beliefs, even though they may be different to their own or may impact on recovery. And ensuring equal access to services and support. No person should be discriminated against or refused access to services based on factors such as gender identity, sexual preferences, cultural and spiritual beliefs, and or customs. Discrimination legislation and acts include the Age Discrimination Act 2004, the Disability Discrimination Act 1992, the Racial Discrimination Act 1975, and the Sex Discrimination Act of 1984. Okay. Okay. Looking at such areas as informed consent, mandatory reporting, privacy, confidentiality and disclosure, and records management. Now, mandatory reporting, that is part of your or within your scope. The mandatory reporting, we can look at the area of child abuse regarding the child. In working with children, we can look at mandatory reporting regarding any abuse and look at elder abuse in this area. And elder abuse consists of financial, sexual, physical, excuse me one moment, emotional, psychological as well, and neglect. Okay. Let's look at privacy and confidentiality and disclosure and the Privacy Act of 1988. It's a Commonwealth Act. Now, this act identifies that workers must obtain consent from clients before communicating their information to others outside the service. This is a particular area where the client needs to give you consent before you actually talk to anyone else about it. You must ensure the client information is stored securely as per workplace procedures, and that might be behind a firewall, that might be passworded, and only particularly certain people can look at that. You must ensure clients are provided with privacy when they come to the service for their appointments. Record management. Filling out progress notes as soon as possible after an appointment, ensuring client information is stored securely, ensure storage systems are efficient and they allow for security. And then informed consent, where the client is actually informed about procedures and processes for their consent. Okay. Let's come back now for some class discussion about mental illness and mental health. Okay, I'm going to come back now with you. Okay, I did see someone else come in then, but let's look and see what we can do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to put you into some breakout rooms, and I want you to discuss in your breakout rooms the definition or the difference between mental illness and mental health. Belle, are you able to hear okay now? Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to put you into some breakout rooms.
Sorry, yes, it's better.
Okay, that's good. Thanks,
Thank you.
Belle. We'll just go into breakout rooms. I'm just going to pause the recording now. Okay, so coming out of your breakout rooms, we've got the two presenters, or the persons that are going to speak on behalf of the team. And we have, first of all, Lisa. Would you like to speak on behalf of your team first?
Yes, we got that mental illness affects an overall functioning of a person,
Right.
which affects their mood, their behavior, and their ability to function with life.
Right.
And mental health refers to the well-being of an individual who can still cope with life and realizes what's going on for them, and perhaps what they need.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So just to paraphrase that, you're saying mental illness is something that causes a dysfunction to the person's health, the person themselves,
to their ability to function
ability to
properly.
function. Okay. Yeah. And mental health affects the person's way they feel. Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, they're able to cope, but it focuses on their emotions, the psychological part, and their social well-being.
I think that word well-being is very well put in that case. I think that you've succinctly put that. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. That's great. Okay, and Belle, you're going to represent the other team?
Yeah, pretty much what Lisa was saying is yeah, just and just to add to it, it's potentially mental illness might be something that is diagnosed.
Yes.
You know, and once they have a diagnosis, they may be on medication. You know, and it's something that they have to live with to function properly, as well as, you know, affecting how their moods, behaviours, and emotions are. And mental health is, yeah, just something that I guess everybody is affected by mental health. You don't necessarily have to have a mental illness, you know, to have good or poor mental health. You know, and everybody can take care of their mental health themselves, you know, in whichever way that they need to. So, yeah, it's something that affects everyone.
Yeah, excellent. And do you guys think that, like, we all have mental health, don't we? So we all have physical health and we all have mental health. So we've always got these particular areas. It's just what affects them that is what we are discussing. So we've all got those things, but we may not always have a mental illness, or we may have both at the same time. No, it's an interesting journey. It's an interesting. It's a bit rabbit holey, if that's is a good word I've just invented. It is something that you can discuss and discuss different from different ways of discussing it, and it's still discussed in different ways as we speak. And it's interesting to see that mental illness, mental health is, and especially if you want to listen to the media, you'll hear the media talk about it as mental health issues or mental impairments, mental health impairments, etc. So it's an area that still has a lot of discussion, but it really isn't. When we sit back at it, it really isn't put into its definitions exclusively. Okay. So let's go a little bit further here in this area, and we'll come back and have another discussion on it. Okay, let me just share my screen again with you, and I'll just go through a little bit more with you. Okay, so let's look at the definition of mental illness and mental health, or really what is the difference between both of these terms. So look, according to Healthline, everyone has mental health, but not everyone receives a diagnosis involving a mental illness. Mental health includes your overall well-being, as well stated before by you guys. Mental illnesses are diagnosable mental health conditions. So definitions of mental health and mental illness will vary depending on who you ask. So even within the medical community, these terms bring discussion. But many agree that while mental illness falls under the umbrella of mental health, the two terms are not interchangeable. Just because your mental health isn't in great shape doesn't always mean that you have a mental illness. And just because you live with a mental illness doesn't necessarily mean your mental health is currently in a good place. So what is a mental illness? Or mental illness is also called mental health conditions or mental health disorders, are diagnosable conditions. They often involve a highly distressing change in your thinking, emotions or behaviours, and can affect how you perform some daily activities. And I know that you alluded to that as well. So to receive a diagnosis involving any mental health condition, a mental health professional will interview you to learn about like the symptoms you're experiencing, how long they've been happening, how severe they are, potential causes of your symptoms. And many people live with mental health conditions. And some of these conditions are such as like bipolar disorder, substance use disorders, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorders, and post-traumatic stress disorders. We've got neurodevelopment disorders like attention deficit, hyperactivity disorders and autism spectrum disorders, and personality disorders. Like we have a huge consortium of disorders that we can look at. So now, what is mental health? Okay, so according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, mental health includes your social, emotional, and psychological well-being, as you well stated as well. It's more than simply the absence of mental illness. Now, the World Health Organization describes good mental health as someone being capable of effectively coping with stresses, learning and working well, contributing to their community. But still, mental health is complex, and your mental health will be unique to you. So what looks like good mental health for one person won't be the same for someone else. Remember, you can have good mental health while living with a mental health condition. So mental health is health. It's just as important as your physical health and an important part of your overall well-being. Okay. And this is reflected elsewhere in our session tonight, and we will have a further discussion on it, as I said. Okay. So let's look at mental illness. We have psychological conditions. Then we have a diagnosis, we have assessment tools, and we have assessment instruments. So let's go back over this again. A mental illness is a psychological condition which is diagnosed by a qualified person. So this qualified person can be a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a GP. And assessment tools and instruments that have been tested are valid to diagnose mental illness. Okay, so that's mental illness. Mental health. Okay, so we have mental health, you know, and then we have physical health. So physical health includes such things as exercise and hydration and fresh air and a certain amount of sunshine, fresh food, fresh water, etc. So they also include with your mental health things as in your feelings, your self-worth, your perception of others, and your ability to function. Okay, let's look at the historical understanding of mental illness. That sounds like a big chapter to look at. Okay, our understanding of mental illness has evolved from the individual being given no rights, like stigmatized, labeled as sick, to the present where there is a push to now understand the illnesses and to be inclusive. So really we were looking at a medical model here. So historically, we looked at people with mental illness being put in mental asylums. We looked at them being put into solitary in some cases. We looked at these mental asylums that had such practices as what we call bird feeding, which is something that they used to have if someone was refusing to eat, then they used this technique called bird feeding. And that's wrapping your neck up and so that it was in an upright position. So people were able to assist you to eat in that position. These were called asylums, as I stated. They were looked at as more in the penal area, more like a prison in some cases. The inmates, as we could call them, or the patients at that particular time were not allowed outside, were not allowed to be part of the community. These particular people did not have rights. They did not have, in some cases, the ability of their families to visit them at all. They were not under any particular regime to be, how could I say this, to be checked at certain times. They weren't under any particular act. So let's go a little bit forward here and have a look at the next one. Okay, so these are current and emerging trends. These current and emerging trends, we're looking at, first of all, recovery. Now, recovery now in regards to mental illness is concerned with developing meaning and purpose in a client's life and developing a positive sense of self. Recovery should be consumer-inspired and consumer-led with self-help programs such as peer support and recreation groups and training. You can see here with the current and emerging trends that it does come into the area of client and person-centered care or client-directed care as a consumer-inspired, consumer-led. Okay, now the next part here we're looking at is the video, and I'll just come back now. I just need to stop my sharing. We'll just turn the recording off until this is completed. Okay, so now we're going to hook up in pairs, and we're going to discuss what are some of the mental illness areas. So, for example, are you okay? So, what are some of those initiatives? So, just think of that. Are you okay? What are other initiatives around mental health that we have? So, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms in twos, and so we can discuss that and come back And yes, you have to choose one of you. Now you've only got a choice of two. Two. And we're going to come back and we're going to listen to those. Okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these initiatives we just spoke of. So who's next? Bron.
Oh, yay. This is awesome because, we all volunteered Lisa and she wasn't even in our group and we still volunteered it. So we had a little bit of what Lisa said before, but we were also talking about Are You OK Day?
Yeah. Yes.
But we were also saying they put biscuits out there saying, Are you okay? They don't say, Are you not okay, biscuits? Everything's more around the positive.
Yes, good.
A lot of the companies now as well are doing their own thing as well. And the same with the schools. We just had a situation with the football club that was in the media and stuff, incident that had happened. Well, now, as a result of that, all the seniors have to have a counsellor come every fortnight that they all have to speak to.
Okay.
Just to sort of
good.
reinforce, I think, more positive behaviour towards women and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot more out there, but all the smaller groups are now having to, do stuff as well, and community groups as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Lisa, you also mentioned Black Dog as well. As Lifeline in that area. Lifeline has several other areas attached to it as well.
We also found like the different, although that's more, I think, on the government website and stuff like that, the eating disorder groups and AA and all of that. So is that sort of towards what you're talking about now, or that's just more?
No, look, that absolutely. Like that all comes under the one umbrella. You're absolutely right. And that's a good, that's a really good point as well. That was excellent. Okay, so who else have we got? Like Luce and Sarah. I'll get there. Good, Sarah. Yeah.
I don't know whether this was the right way to think about it. I thought of some initiatives that were aimed around bullying.
Yes.
I don't know whether you know about Dolly's Dream.
Yes.
Yeah, the country girl who went to the boarding school and she killed herself because of online bullying.
Yeah.
So her parents set up a charity to try and change the culture of bullying. And it addresses the impact of the bullying, how it causes anxiety and depression, can cause youth suicide. So they provide education for that, and I suppose provide a voice and a platform for the people who can't speak for themselves. They advocate for them, and it's all to try and prevent the lives of other kids doing what Dolly did. It is a registered charity, and they have a Do It for Dolly Day, which is on the 10th of May. I'm not sure whether that's the day she died or what the significance of that day is, but everyone wears blue, and it's dedicated to bring the community together to spread kindness and take a stand against bullying. And there's also a Bullying No Way Day that the kids do at school. So I suppose that's along the same lines.
That's great. That's a great idea.
And I know something that comes up on my newsfeed and Facebook a lot. It's called Better Health, which is the counselling that you can get.
Yes. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, well done. And also in the counselling area, or really more in the trauma area, I suppose is a better way of saying it, is Blue Knot. I don't know whether you know of Blue Knot, KNOT, like Blue Knot. It's an initiative centered around trauma. So childhood trauma, betrayal trauma, what can I say? Critical incident, for want of a better word, trauma. So this is a little bit of a one that is not probably as well known yet around there, but specifically points to trauma. And I was listening to over the weekend, over 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, while I was doing some work, the mental health seminar over 3 days. There was a speaker on the last day yesterday talking about mental health in workplaces and how significant that was to the industries, and what their organisations or what the businesses had put in place to assist their workers, their employees. So, for example, where you work, what has your organisation put in place to actually help you? And it ranged from the area of having therapists come in and counsellors come in and speak about particular areas. You being able to book an appointment for yourself with a counsellor or therapist of some sort, to actually, when they said to one organisation, what do you do? What are your initiatives around mental health? And they said, well, we all have a cup of tea together on a Friday. So it actually ranges from an organisation putting a huge amount of support in for their workers around mental health issues and or mental health of the workers, because this is an area that is wide-reaching. Around trauma, for example, trauma can reach through like years, tens of years of life. It will come back as if it was just yesterday, and the triggers. So people can be triggered around these areas. When working it, for example, it could be with a saying or with a particular noise, or sometimes it's a smell. So it's working in this area to support people's mental health in one of the largest parts of their life. Like, you spend a lot of time at work. You spend a lot of time at work, and a lot of this time is, as Sarah mentioned, can come into, we have policies and procedures around bullying. We have policies and procedures about physical harm at work. We have policies and procedures, how you can talk to people, how you can't talk to people, and that. But it's all right having these things down in your policies and procedures, but you must put the framework around that to support your workers as well.
I was just going to say, like, I worked at Coles for a while doing night fill when I finished up with my last job.
Yeah.
Before I came into this, and we did all of these, like, units online as whatever.
Yes, yeah.
But it doesn't actually go into practice, because everyone just wants to get the job done.
Yes.
And the managers would look at you if someone was in tears or having a hard time and you're going over to help them, like, get your stuff done. So, they'd make it as if, like, they're a big company, they'd support it. They put on the afternoon teas or the snacks at night. But when it came down to practice, they actually didn't give a flying. They just wanted that job done.
Yes, yeah, and perhaps this is where the education needs to be, actually be inserted into the organisation, is into the management area.
Yeah,
so that those sorts of things can be enacted. And a lot of the places, I don't know whether you've worked in a place that has a mental health first aid, was usually something that all employees went through to be able to see the symptoms and to be able to know what to, or how to react and how to help that person. So a lot of places. So I could see, Zidan, that you've worked in an organisation that has had first aid, mental health first aid, for example. So in a lot of cases, you could be that actual first aid person as well, because people see when someone is physically hurt, people can see it, but when someone has a mental health issue, and a lot of the times it only can see it when that symptom comes out physically in the person. They can't see that, so they can't see it. It doesn't exist to a lot of people. Okay, that was well done. Now, next one's Margot.
It felt for a moment like I won an award.
Yes,
I wasn't expecting it.
Would you like to come up to stage now? Yes. Yeah.
What I took it as literally is World Health Organization, and what about Australian government, how they relate back to it. So the wording on the World Health Organization was that everybody have a to ensure universal health coverage, and that involve access and to quality and affordable mental health. So I think to tick that box, every government has to propose some kind of policy.
Yes,
So Australia has the better access, which was mentioned before. So
yes.
that's the Medicare rebate to provide mental health appointments. Um, but out of all the organizations that were mentioned, I think I could relate to Blind Black Dog Institute,
Yeah.
which offers, for example, 10 sessions for in local community. They link it per postcode when you sign up that you have particular mental health disorder, which in this case is depression and bipolar. They allow this to raise awareness. But for people who have a living experience, that is initiative from Black Dog. They have
Mm,
been doing it 12 years ago. They continue doing it. I have done this program twice while I wasn't able to afford psychological session to a certain
mhm,
extent.
mhm.
So I heard what Lisa said, and that was really encouraging that there are places like place of worship that you could go
Mm,
and
mm.
also get this kind of treatment. I think it's holistic care. It's holistic care. It's what we need specifically these days with financial strain.
That's excellent. And I'm really pleased that you went to that umbrella area of that all encompassing WHO initiative there that feeds down into separate areas. And with your organizations too, I think you have three counseling sessions, I think, that you are able to have. And I think it's in your organization. And a lot of the time they were speaking about this too over the weekend, and a lot of the time people don't take those up. They don't take them up because they don't were coming through on the chat in those particular times that person was talking. They don't feel that it's confidential in a lot of ways, but they were assured by the person who was with these organizations that was confidential. So now, who's left have we got to do? Lucy? Lucy? Are you able to use you're not able to use your talk button? You could give me
Lucy was with me.
Oh, okay then. So if we would have had a chance here, yep, that's all good. It's a really good idea if you take a list of these and their contact numbers. You may have them in your resource, but it's really good for you to have them in your own community. Now, Lisa, you spoke about your local church having a form of mental health assistance there. And you also spoke about different areas, say, for example, Lifeline. And now Lifeline also has a really fabulous training part of their organization for people who want to go on the phones, who want to go into this area. They also have a lot of volunteers in other areas as well. Lisa, have you got anything else to add to that at all?
Neighborhood centers usually have the ability to give you access to some kind of service.
Yes, yes. And it's the ability to be able to reach out to them, isn't it? I mean, that's the first step. The first step is to getting to that stage where you make that decision to ask for help.
Yeah, that can be a really difficult hurdle to come over.
Yes, and not only once, but many times as well. Sarah, I saw you to put something in the chat, so we'll have a look at that soon. That was really good, guys. That was excellent. So, Lifeline now has a digital service. Oh, okay. It has an SMS now, doesn't it? It has a text service as well. That's a really good idea, I think. I think people I'm much better texting. It's not all about me, as it usually is. But people sometimes I think are much better at texting because it takes away that kind of what is the word I'm looking for you? In your face type of thing. Like,
Yeah,
come on.
because I was like, I live out in the country and it's hard for me to get work experience in the call centre. And I
Yeah.
found out about this digital service. So I'm actually doing now a course before I can join the digital service. So
Oh, great.
I'm halfway through it. And then once I've done that, I can get a placement and then I can join. So
Oh, that's fantastic.
yeah,
Oh, good for you.
yeah, trying, getting there.
No, good for you. That's fantastic. Once you get into this area, it is just full of so many opportunities.
Oh, yeah, it is.
It's just huge. It's just like opening Pandora's box some of the time.
Yeah.
Sarah.
I know people might find it hard to ask for help because they don't actually know where to even begin.
Yeah.
What's wrong? And
Yeah.
so it's easier just not to ask. It's like you've got so much going on and it's all messed up in your head, so you don't know how to even start telling anyone about it. And it's when someone says to you, "Are you okay?" It's easier just to say, "Yep."
Yes. Yes. And don't we automatically go to say that? Aren't we kind of so programmed to say yes? How are you feeling? Great. Are you okay? Fine. I'm wonderful. But a lot of the time too, if you do call up, those people at the other end of those phones, they're trained to listen. Like they're trained to, if someone, said, "Oh, I don't know where to start," they're trained to find an opening. But then perhaps you were quite right in saying that, because people would not know that. In a lot of cases, I think that this is a type of knowledge and education and information that should be in the public space. That should be, say, for example, with Lifeline, that should be in some sort of video, some sort of ad type thing with somebody making that call and what they say. So that can give some person who may be thinking about that some idea of how to do that. That person might know, why and when and any, but it's a lot of the time it's how to do it or how to get it out.
There's no shame with it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and or stigma, and it's a little bit like having something physically wrong with you. So when you go to the doctor, it's almost like, I have a pain in my back. It's not like I have a pain in the third vertebrae up to 3.5 inches to the right regarding the sciatic muscle, whatever, sciatic nerve. It's saying I've got something wrong here, or I don't feel well. And it's the same with mental health. I don't feel well. I'm not well. Now, that's a lot of the time people will say I'm not well, and not know why they're not well. Zinat, where are you? Where are you? Oh, there you are. Yes.
Also, that when you were talking about stigma, also cultural
Yes.
barrier as well.
Yes.
That's hard because I was volunteering back in where I live in Tassie. Most of the people there, like example, the refugee that I meet, it's really difficult for them, especially the woman, because of you just need to be well all the time. And like you said, you can't see mental health well-being, you cannot see in naked eye. It's eternal. So how I did it is I just try to have a normal conversation, and that's when they started to bring up how internal they are feeling internally. So culture is huge to play a big part in like being ashamed having this. That's like they have a disease or something, that's what they feel. Yeah. So yeah.
It's really interesting. And is there any assistance, any help for them? Is there anything offered?
Yes. The church that is in Signet is helping them. So we have like they will call, because depends on what culture they are. So they will designate, whoever want to help. And so I managed to come across just a mother, and she has 4 young kids not driving. She didn't drive, so she had difficulties to start her life again coming from overseas. and then not speaking English is really difficult for them as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's another barrier for them to ask for help.
Yeah.
But now, yeah, so the church is play a huge part in the refugee lives where I live there. Yeah.
That's an excellent point. And I think that when you're talking about people whose first language is in English, that finding a person that can communicate with them in their own language
Exactly.
is paramount, really, to be able to help. And isn't it, this is where lived experience comes into a lot of it as well, that you have the ability to understand, and also the person or the client feels so very safe with someone with lived experience that they will understand what they're telling them, and not to feel afraid or ashamed or not have the ability to be honest and outgoing as
true.
well with those people. I think that's an excellent point, and to see that, sometimes it's not looking for a cure. Sometimes, we just can't take something out of a packet or a box or a bottle, but it's managing it. And I think that's a lot with a lot of things. It's managing it and it's understanding the illness. So once you have the understanding of the illness, and a lot of people I know and clients I've worked with say, oh, I can't go there. Oh, that's something I can't talk about. So knowing that your illness, well, you are the expert in your own self, knowing that you know that this you will not be a well person if you go in this place, or you watch this, or you hear this type of thing. So I think that is knowing your illness well, and also being able to manage it. But also, no one's perfect. No one is ever perfect, and understanding that you don't have to be perfect. You can't be a perfect person. So the ability to understand, these things that we call little things that other people may do this way, but you do it this way. This is just the way some people are. Everyone is different, and you can't expect people to all do things in the same way, or we wouldn't be all different, and that would be extremely boring, I think. I think that
there'd be lots of minions of me. Sounds pretty good.
I think we should celebrate differences, celebrate people's differences. We should have Difference Day. I think that sounds really good to me. Okay, that was a really, really good exercise you guys did. You are really you're really good at that. Okay, so let's go back into the PowerPoint and we'll look at some other areas here. So I'm just going to share my screen again. This is on. Okay, so we just worked through that one there. Let's have a look at this one here. Okay, so we've got the models of practice here. There we go. They suddenly arrived. Okay, let's have a look. We've spoken a little bit about recovery here. So these are principles and practices of the mental health sector. And these include such things as recovery orientated. Now, this involves workers supporting the person's or client's capabilities, supporting them to recognise their strengths, and supporting them to take responsibility for their own recovery and well-being. It's supporting them to have autonomy and to have independence. So it's not doing everything for them or telling them all the time what to do. It is actually supporting them to become independent and have autonomy. Evidence-based. So this means that work practices need to be informed by the best available evidence from a range of sources. So this means like critically assessing all of the evidence and deciding on an outcome based on the evidence. And I've worked in organisations that use, for example, video as evidence. They might have had, for example, a client that has in their support plan form of exercise. And in this, with this particular client, it was soccer. He had an absolute love of soccer. So being strengths-based, the plan was to be able to, for him to access a local soccer club so that he could join, which he then did, and the support worker would take him to his soccer practice and the soccer games that he went to. And so for that particular evidence of that progression and the positive outcome of that, they used video evidence. Okay. A lot of other evidence can be in your documentation area. A lot of other evidence can be in feedback and in quotes that the client has said, or feedback from the client support worker, client's family, for example. And then we get to values-based. And that means to collaborate effectively when people's values conflict. This includes carers, family, and friends at the core of the decision-making. So it means that when you have conflict in areas, so for example, at decision-making, that you have the ability to collaborate with people when people's values are conflicting. So people's values come from a lot of places. They may come from their childhood, their upbringing. They may come from their religious instruction when they were young. They may come from the cultural group they're involved in. They may come from the people that they kind of hang out with at the moment, their friends. So people get their values from different areas, and they get their values throughout life. So values may change over life, which I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with. Values that you started out as someone quite young would have changed and may have changed quite considerably through that time. So think of everything that we're looking at as independence, autonomy regarding recovery-orientated models of practice. We're looking at evidence-based models of practice, and we're looking at a values-based one as well. Okay, now let's look at the recovery model. Lisa, did you have a question at all?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with evidence-based, would that include, like, if the client is interested in art, would you organise art therapy for them to go to?
I think it probably starts at the beginning, a little bit earlier than that, when you're doing, for want of a better word, an assessment of the client. So when we're working with a strengths-based practice, you're quite right. We look at the strengths that the client has, and the client may have strengths and always has a passion, for example, art, maybe sketching. Just take that for example. So we can see that the client has an interest, a passion in that area, and that is something that the client likes to do. So using a strengths-based approach, as you just mentioned regarding the art, we might use such resources as a sketch pad and some pencils, and being able to put the client in touch with, or start a group up, or have the client introduced to a group that is able to that they're able to join in this area. So that also gives them the socialization. It also gives them the ability to communicate with people other than their support worker or their immediate family. And then when you're talking about evidence, yes, that evidence may be videoing, that evidence may be the particular artwork that person has had, but it could, that sort of form of evidence would be part of a whole evidence. So we're looking at that holistically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, for example, if a client that had a passion for music and say a passion for playing the guitar, I'm thinking of one of my particular clients. So that client also wrote his own songs, and his ability to write songs also enabled him to get his emotions and the way he was feeling down on paper, you know, out and down in another form. So it wasn't as so personalized as it was, as it would be talking, you know, face to face with a person. I'll just come back because I can just see another question here. There we go. And the client as well with his music, he was able to also to write the songs, to play them, and that was of course put to music, and that or recorded, and that was part of the evidence as well. With this particular client too, using the theme and his passion for music, we were able to set up a choir. You know, this is just, you know, and working with such areas in art and music and, you know, pottery and anything with the senses is a way of communicating. You know, you can look at a painting or hear some music, and it's the way that's put together communicates a type of feeling for you. Yeah. So that is a way of communicating. And we're working with something as in the senses, which is a different part of the makeup of the brain. So it's a different area that we're using. So it is an area that I'm just thinking of an example. So there was a client, or lots of clients like this, but one client in particular who had a very, you know, a progressive Alzheimer's disease. And she's probably, you know, there's 7 stages of Alzheimer's, and she was probably like 4 or 5, which is quite progressive. You can go up and down that particular scale. And it was she was very, you know, she could be very disorientated and very confused about a lot of areas. But once you put a certain waltz on, she knew exactly what to do. She knew exactly what steps to do. She knew exactly how to hold, you know, a person, to how to dance. She knew exactly. And they were really, really quite intricate steps, you know, really quite intricate. And other clients who were, in a lot of cases, could only say a few words. But if you put a song on, they would hum it. They knew that, you know, and they could sing a song that right out of the air. They could it would just come out of the air, and they had so much joy in doing that. So that type of communication you're able to bring to a client, and we're talking about mental illness, and we're talking about, and I'm sure you've seen those areas with such illnesses as schizophrenia. They use a lot of artwork in schizophrenia. You know, a lot of artwork, a lot of empowerment, finishing something and doing that piece of art. A lot of vitalness comes back into people's lives when, for example, they might hang it up for sale. There's a particular video about that where the client who was schizophrenic that did the artwork took it along, they hung it up for sale, and someone bought it. Now, what a lot of value that brings in to that person's life. You know, that just covers a huge amount of holistic care. You know, from being proud and empowered and finding someone with such a positive outcome that somebody else wants that and would pay for that. That was a huge, huge part of his life. No, it's such it's such a wonderful area to be able to get into the ways that you can use different forms of communication so that someone can get happiness in their life, and they get a lot of happiness being able to make someone else happy too, like that. Because when someone starts singing, the rest start singing too. Sometimes not quite as good, but you know, they get there in the end. You know, they get there. But it's just to see some people that are happy that they haven't been happy for a long time. Okay, good question though. Let me share the screen again with you. Okay, so we're looking at the recovery model now. And the recovery model is a term within the mental health sector which refers to an individual's ability to develop meaning and purpose in their life. It focuses on fostering hope and empowerment to the individual. It implies that people can recover from mental illness and regain a sense of accomplishment. It is not being limited by symptoms, instead dealing with them. So not being limited by, I can't do this because of this. It's not being limited by that. It means dealing with it. Okay, now this is working in a recovery orientated framework. So then we can see in the framework that it is a right-based service, a rights-based service. So this means that recognizing that the person is the expert in their own lives. You know, they have rights, they're an expert in their own lives. It means recovery is a range of outcomes, and recovery may mean different things to different people. Everybody's recovery is different. Framework could mean individual journeys, as I've just mentioned. So each person should be treated as an individual and treated to feel empowered in their life. It's not like the cookie cutter type of technique involved here. The framework looks at empowerment and taking responsibility for their own recovery. It's an interesting word there. So taking responsibility for their own recovery, and responsibility is a really big journey. You know, it's on this. You know, the person has got to own things. It is their responsibility to do this. This is your responsibility to be able to bring into your life these particular areas. You know, that's always a learning capacity, or an area where you then see where people see themselves in their world when we look at empowerment. Okay, so still in this area here, we're looking at collaboration and your role. Now that should be guided, you know, you're being guided by the client or the person's choices and their goals. Now, within reason here as well, because in some cases, a person's choice may not particularly fit in with the legal aspects in some area, or what the person has agreed to earlier. And I'm thinking of one of my clients who there was when we had the meeting regarding putting her particular support plan together that she agreed to. One of those was for her to exercise 20 minutes a day. This person was particularly needed to have exercise. She needed to, for her to get to feel healthy and to get healthy again, she needed to lose some considerable amount of weight, her nurse navigator stated. But by goodness, I tell you what, she was so good at not exercising, getting out of that. Oh, my foot's sore. Oh no, I was told I couldn't have to do this. Oh no, no, that's not what I do today. So, and also very, very good at knowing her right to refuse and her right to make choice. So we had to be very creative into being able to get that, to follow the nurse navigators and the physios, actually the physios comments in there. Being a role model, you know, being a model that shows, that models respect and patience, flexibility and resilience. So you can be the role model for your client, you know, especially in social circumstances. And we use mentors and role models in this case in social circumstances of for example, teaching or showing, demonstrating, teaching, showing, demonstrating. I don't know which word to choose there. A client how to catch public transport. That's a big thing. You know, that's a really big thing in some areas. That the client, you know, this particular client was being taught or demonstrated or role modeling how to catch a bus, you know, down to the train station. And that took a long time to be able to get that client to do that, to be able to get him to be comfortable in knowing what to do, to be comfortable in himself, to be confident, you know, that it needs a lot of confidence to be able to do all that steps, you know, getting to the right place at the right time, catching the right bus, knowing what to do with the bus card, knowing where to get bus cards, where to sit. But there was a team around this client. There was a team that helped him. There were support worker on the bus. There was a support worker at the end of the evidence of his designation. There was a support worker at the bus stop. So everybody was with him. And what we did, what it was a form of what we would call fading. We called it fading, and where the client, first of all, was taken and helped with everything, you know, showing everything, supported with everything. And every time that we went back to do that, one little bit of support was taken away, and then another little bit. So at the end, like training wheels, really, I suppose, is a good way of saying it. So at the end, the client was doing it by themselves, not unknowingly, until it was pointed out to him. And then he had the biggest smile when he realized that. So that's a part of like modeling and role plays that we can do. Ups and downs, being flexible with approaches and support. And as we talked about before, it's not everyone is perfect, not everything is perfect. So it's celebrating the differences in a lot of ways as well. Okay, so this is a recovery alliance relationship. So as a worker in the mental health industry, workers must facilitate a recovery alliance relationship. Sounds like something out of Star Trek. That is agreed upon by all the parties involved. Okay, let's go a little bit further here. We need to recognise support needs, to facilitate capacity building, which is what we were doing when I was telling you about that particular client, modelling respect. And now we're going to have a discussion about that. So I'm just going to come back into this area here to stop sharing and to have a particular discussion. Okay, we'll have a look at some more breakout rooms in a minute, and just to have a discussion on how we can look at that particular area, how we can look at putting a recovery alliance together. Lisa. You right there?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
It's 8:10. I just thought I'd let you know.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, okay, so we'll have another break now, and I will see you back at 20 past. Okay, I'll just turn the recording off now. Thank you for that, Lisa. So, Bron, yeah, so we're just talking about recovery alliances and how we would support that. So, Bron, what are your thoughts on that?
So when you were talking before about like everyone sort of collaborating together and stuff like that, I had a situation on the weekend where one client were all support workers for psychology type of thing.
Yeah.
She doesn't communicate properly with the her GP, how much she's drinking, stuff like that.
Right.
So I did it sort of behind her back, and I'm going like, no, like try 5, 6, you know, type of thing. But then she had a bad day on Friday, and I actually let the other support worker know that was taking her on Saturday. She sent me a message later that day saying that I'd gone behind her back and blah, blah, blah. So I apologized and said, I was just trying, but then later that night, complete breakdown and had a knife at her dad.
Right.
So I sort of had the right idea that something wasn't right.
Yes.
Yeah. So in that situation, I know I broke trust, but I'm actually not really sorry for breaking trust either.
And sometimes there, when we're looking at when someone can hurt themselves or they can hurt someone else, this is an area where privacy and confidentiality can be broken. You know, it can be broken in ways like if you're subpoenaed to court. You could, and if someone is going to harm themselves, or if someone is going to harm someone else as well, then yes, those are the areas and the time that you can do that.
Okay.
But I think that when you're with this, say for example, network or alliance type of thing in this area, it's quite imperative to sort the communication out, the avenues of communication and how they should be communicated, and this is all put together really in the network, and how, for example, your physio may only want them to be communicated by email. Your speech, your speech pathologist may only want text. And so it's all those things really, and being able to communicate, but also to be able to communicate also to, I don't want to say the word read, but to be aware of the changes in the client, be aware of those mood shifts, be aware of those. We used to call them, I know when we walked in, it was like I could hear the music to Jaws playing. That type of understanding that something is just not right. It's, I don't know, almost they talk about an instinct, but it's almost like, oh, there's something not quite right here. Lisa, thank you, Bron. Lisa.
When you are working with a client and they do have other supports in place, and that something is going on for that client that is negatively affecting them, how do you communicate, or are you able to communicate to the other support networks without breaking privacy and confidentiality?
Right. That's a really good question. So what you're doing there is you're following the policies and procedures from your organization. So your organization, they will train you in this area, so they don't just throw you in with a client, and that this client, like, there's a brief on the client. There's a lot of, you'll send a support plan, and you'll discuss the support plan is discussed, and there's areas of concern that might be discussed. You're well aware of your mode of communication, for want of a better word. You won't be thrown into this first off. I mean, you would shadow a support worker first, and it's getting to know the client. Like, you won't be just like put in front of the client and here you go. It's up to the client whether they like you too. They might say, I know one of my clients says, well, I don't want her, and I don't want her, I really don't want him. So it's this area there where you will have that mode of communication. The first thing that you would do, and this was an example of, I had a client that I had him taught him in his special school. I really don't like that word, but it's not another word they use. And I was also going to, it was how can I say, an escalation. So I went to the client's house. This was at night time, actually, that he was quite unwell. And when I went in there, there's one thing that I hadn't been briefed on, that this client's mother also had a mental illness. I hadn't been briefed on that. So that was an interesting night. But all that, when this particular event occurred, all I did with training really is that what we're trained for is to call our 24-hour number and get some assistance. So your policies and procedures will direct you when to communicate and how, on whether you have an emergency or whether you need to communicate any change that you see in the client, how you do that and who you call. Your organization will take over the rest. If you're of course, if you're in a situation that needs an ambulance straight away, of course, you would ring that straight away, and then your organization, but they're prepared and they have their processes in place to communicate that type of understanding. If you feel that your client is not well or becoming increasingly unwell, then yes, you call your organization. And even at nighttime, they'll have someone on call over all 24 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You should never be alone. You should always have someone that you can contact. And for me, a lot of the time it was the police, because a lot of the time the police were involved with these particular clients as well. So they knew where they were, they knew where they were traveling from. You always alerted them to anything that may happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Zainab.
What with all that situation happen, what if there's a children involved? How can, as a social worker, how can I find a way of doing things when there's a children involved in that situation, in the recovery process thing?
Okay, that would have been identified in the planning process or with the client as well, and there would be a strategy put in place for that. So that should be, so if you're involved in the meeting and the support meeting with caseworkers, etc., then that is an understanding that there is children involved and what will happen in these incidences. And you can always speak up, but what about this? I mean, everybody has a voice in this. You know, there's always going to be some time that something is not quite right. That always is. And that's usually the time that we put in new policies and procedures in place.
Can also mediation be part of recovery session as well? Mediation between the client and yourself, like as a social worker, or like the party that involved?
I think that's individualistic to the client. I think that is something that is, because everyone is unique and it's person-centered care, individualized care, that comes with a person, that comes with whether that is some area you should explore in that client, with that client. Yeah, that's my feelings on it. That's a good question to ask Helen too.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so just getting back into this area now, just about there. Okay, so we've had a discussion on that area there regarding recovery and relationships. And the next one here is really just to look at the summary area, a summary session. So we've talked about sharing information, and we've talked about collecting information and informing the recovery plan. We've talked about some examples in this area. We've talked about area of duty of care, and we've talked about that being balanced out with dignity of risk. It's a really important part, duty of care and dignity of risk. It's kind of a universal area which comes into like privacy and confidentiality. It's right up there on the top 10, you know. It's with you wherever you work. Duty of care and dignity of risk, privacy and confidentiality, WHS, work health and safety. All of those things there will be part of your work for many, many years. Okay, so just coming back into stopping sharing my screen again is, okay, so what I wanted to just let you know, I wanted to describe one of the things we've used before, like so effectively. It was really effective when we looked at something regarding perseverance with the client, independence, autonomy, being accountable for their own actions. A big thing, you know, this is part of social skills as well, as being accountable and taking responsibility. This is one of the techniques we've used, and it with this particular client, that I was not the support worker, or I wasn't involved in this, but another one of my support workers, or one of the caseworkers was, and we used this idea from her trial. So the client was a male, a 14-year-old male. And the client was going through things and learning his social skills, but also learning, living skills, skills about helping him to live in the world, like opening a bank account, buying groceries, understanding how, buying groceries, what say one banana, knowing how to weigh the banana and work out what the price, all of those types of things. Now, one of the areas of that the client particularly didn't like was the shopping type of experience, but he needed to understand that, like he needed to know how to buy groceries. That was one thing, one of the things in his life that that was a basic need. Okay, he didn't like paying bills either, but that's another thing. So this particular person did, the client wanted so much this new bike. He really, really wanted this new bike. That was the one thing in his life that we was really focused on, and everything else was blocked out. So what they did was that the client told them what particular model and type of bike they wanted. And they went in and they took a photo of this bike in the bike shop or whatever, and they blew it up, like they blew it up quite big, and they put it on the wall. That he was in a particular house, and they put it on this wall. And then every time that the client went shopping every week, and when he was successful in when he managed to to go through the checkout, when he managed to put the things where they were supposed to go and to choose them, and use his social skills in this particular aspect. Then he got to, and before this, they got this big photo. I forgot this really integral part of this. They got the big photo and they cut it up into little strips. So they cut it up into strips like this, and they cut the whole thing up and they put it down beside his wall. So every time he managed to do that. He managed to have a really positive outcome from this particular task he had to do. They put a strip up. So every time he did that, they put a strip up, and slowly the strip, it started to make the bike. So he could see visually how he was going in his, in his tasks, how he was doing that. And he could also see that when he didn't, like sometimes he'd just say, I refuse to do this, I'm not going to do it. They took a strip down. So he could see what his reaction was and what the outcome was to what he did, what happened. Like it was a visual cue for him to understand. And that's how he understood that the bike grew. And at the end, he did have the entire picture, and then he got the bike. So that was the outcome. And we used that over many, many clients since then. Yeah, Belle, like a star chart, but this one actually made the image of what he wanted. This one was what he saw. He didn't quite understand stars and counting very well, but he could understand that's what I want. And this is how I'm getting there, by learning, being successful and learning these types of things. So yeah, visualizing his good progress. Yeah, that's exactly what he was doing. And even when, that it didn't grow, it came back, it was still a really good exercise for him to see that, because people are used to getting, they're not used to having something taken away. If you think about it, you're just not, no, we're not doing that. So that's not really taking it away. It's just not doing, is it? So when something is actually taken away, even that can trigger some types of behaviors. It's also working through that, which was also a byproduct of that exercise as well. Working through that, where has it gone? Why did you take it away? Working through that type of escalation that happened. And that was all tied up into one exercise or one technique or one type of task. So these are the types of things that you can put together to teach more than, one thing. But the client still is the expert. The client still is the person in that the whole care centers around. And when we spoke before about the client having choice, and I explained that sometimes the client's choices aren't the best choices, and it's working around and knowing the techniques and the strategies that are involved in in managing that, if that makes sense. So one particular client I had used to self-harm quite considerably, but she was around, I suppose she was around 14 or 15 as well. And as well as self-harming, she had a really type of sexual precociousness around males. She just would switch into this kind of like, kind of a type of highly sexualized person. So when some of her choices came up, they weren't particularly good choices in areas. So I would be taking her to an appointment at the hospital, and little did I know that she'd already texted to meet some 40-year-old man beside the bakery in the hospital, whatever. So those types of choices that you only find out right at that last minute, which is always puts an interesting slant onto the work.
So what did you do then, Deb?
What did I do?
Yeah, did you try to stop it, or did you just let her go, knowing not let her go, but just say, what the risks are?
She also knew her boundaries. Now, she'd agreed, but then she always agreed. She agreed to work within these particular boundaries. So what I did was her appointment was calling for her.
Yeah.
They wanted her. It was at a hospital. She had an appointment with the nurse navigator, and the nurse navigator was waiting for her, and then we couldn't just wait around there. It was really important. So it was to bring that sense of urgency that she had to be somewhere else as well.
Yeah.
But I did report that straight back to the organisation as soon as I could, as soon as I had a chance, because they needed to see whether there should have been any other extra support in that area, or whether they needed to work in a different way. Not responsibility. The ability to call back to your organisation so that they are like the thinking tank, where you're like on the ground, is a fabulous part of the job, in that they will be there with psychs and whoever they can to direct. And sometimes you need direction, because sometimes you've just got to be on the ground, and that sometimes takes a lot of running in some cases. Yeah, but I didn't win all the time, though. I didn't win with the tattoo. Where is she? Where has she gone now? Oh, look what I've got. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that was interesting, putting that down on the report. Client now has a tattoo on her right arm. Yeah. So did we decide on that? I don't see that in the support plan anywhere. Possibly not at that stage. So that is some of the areas that we that we can use that particular technique, and that is up to you, to use your ability to be creative in that area, when you know what your clients' passions are, when you know what their needs, their values, whatever, is to put together a plan like this. With sport, you've got a sport physiologist that you can use, depending on how much funding they've got. You can also apply for extra funding for different areas if you wish as well, but that's a whole different area too. Okay, so I think as well with you guys, so you've got apparently some homework to do. I was saving that right to last. You have some assessments to do. If I'm correct, I'm just passing on that. I'm just the messenger here. And is there any questions at all you have about anything? Well, I am just going to thank you so much, and I'm going to turn the recording off now and just be right back to you.